Good morning, everybody. This is so strange. I've never done anything like this before. And believe me, I am technologically challenged. So I hope this works. Now, when I first gave the synopsis of this talk to Kathy, about a century ago, like last February, who knew this is where we would be as a nation and as a world today? Only 2 weeks ago, March 15th, I was at a potluck bridge tournament attended by 40 people who played together at card tables and shared food at break times. So much has changed, and we are all now living in a whole new normal. Yet the topic I chose is even more relevant today. I love synchronicity. In February, my main concern, according to the synopsis, was the apparent polarization of all people in our country and in the world. Using the news only as an analogy, okay? We seem to divide ourselves in this country into the Fox News world and the MSNBC news world, with most people somewhere in between, but even the ones in between tended to lean one way or the other. Now we're coming together as we face this new challenge. I'm reminded of a story by Ursula Le Guin, The Lathe of Heaven. It's about a psychiatrist who discovers that his patient's dreams actually create reality. The doctor gives the patient post-hypnotic suggestions of what to dream so that he, meaning the doctor, can manipulate the future. But when the dreams come true, it's never what the doctor expected. Finally, he tells the patient to dream that all people in the world come together and stop fighting each other. The next day, there is an invasion of hostile aliens from outer space. And that brings the people of the world together, but Anyway, it seems like that's about what we're experiencing now. Only our invaders are invisible, and unfortunately, they're from this planet. Of course, we may have different interpretations of how this situation came to be and how to deal with it, but we can all see the virus as a threat. We all want hospitals and medical personnel to be fully able to care for all the sick people. Even the Republicans and Democrats in Congress are coming together to pass huge aid bills. Who would have thought this possible in February? So where are we and what are we doing? Now, people are social animals. We care about each other and we want to be together. On Monday, the teachers from New York School here in Lawrence formed a parade in their cars. They drove around the neighborhood. They stopped at the homes of each of the children in their school, and they were waving and calling out as they went by. Their cars were decorated with signs, one of which said, "We may be 6 feet apart, but you are always in my heart." On Tuesday, the teachers at Langston New School did the same. And I imagine teachers from other elementary schools are probably following suit. We're exploring other ways to be together as well. Zoom meetings and webinars, they're springing up all over. And some of us have to learn new skills, especially those who are as technologically challenged as I am. So it's, an opportunity. I was on my first webinar on Tuesday. We experienced several technological difficulties because the webinar lane or channel, I don't know what you call it, was so crowded. Oops, there's my cat. Come on, kitty. She wants to help. Anyway, the webinar channel was so crowded with too many webinars going on at once. I'm still going to bridge tournaments. I am online through something called Bridge Based Online, or BBOL. It's been in existence for many years, but I just joined. It used to be that the number of players in each tournament was limited to 40. Then it was expanded to 100. The last tournament I joined had a limit of 500 people, and it filled up in less than 10 minutes. Now, we can play if we want to with a robot, but that tournament filled up with 500 people in less than 10 minutes because we want to play with each other. We don't want to play with robots. Creative people are forming Facebook groups to stay in touch with each other. I've been invited to join a house party on my phone so that four friends can have regular conversations while we play bridge online. A friend who has hosted an overnight art retreats for several years is planning one totally on Zoom. Mental health professionals are using FaceTime to interact with their clients. Some stores are having senior hours, times when older and more vulnerable people can shop more safely. Keeping our social distancing in mind, I was visiting with a friend at Checkers Trainings hours. She told me that she's been getting phone calls from people she hadn't heard from in years. It's like Christmas every time the phone rings, is how she put it. So the topic of this talk is metta, the Buddhist practice of loving kindness. Now, what is that? And what does it have to do with this new normal? So let me back up a little bit. As many of you know, I have been facilitating many series of classes under the rubric of spiritual awakenings for over 15 years. The lessons plans are channeled. I receive them from my spiritual sources, and believe me, I've learned a lot. This winter in the art class, we studied the principle of metta. I euphemistically call my spiritual sources the powers that be, or the powers. So I refer to them that way. That's what I mean, is, my spiritual sources. They say that the reason they asked me to begin these classes in the fall of 2004 was because of the times in which we live. The human race is in transition from one evolutionary stage to another. To explain what they mean, they use the chakras as metaphors. When humans first became self-aware, back in the Garden of Eden, they lived on the first chakra level, which had to do with basic survival. Once that was pretty much figured out, we moved to the second chakra, which had to do with interpersonal relationships, particularly sexual relationships and family orientations. Next, we evolved to the third stage, or solar plexus, or self-awareness. Civilization with its laws and boundaries came into reality. People divided themselves into groups and nations separate from each other. Competition arose. Artificial differences were stressed. Amazing scientific discoveries were made. New worlds explored, and knowledge exploded. But also, war evolved as a means to settle disputes, and the world's natural resources were exploited. We're now nearing the end of this stage and moving to the fourth, or heart. This transition time began in earnest after World War II. We are now pretty much 50-50, with slightly more of us in fourth chakra than third, but with a long way to go. The differences can be explained by looking at the goals. In third chakra thinking puts money and material possessions as the measure of success. It relies on divisions among people and competition, as these physical resources are seen to be limited. This belief system can encourage people to get everything they can by any means necessary. Otherwise, they're not successful. There may be a great deal of kindness and support for those we see as allies, but not for those we have decided are in competition with us or that we see as enemies. On the other hand, the measure of success in fourth chakra is happiness and its related cousins of joy and bliss, which are in endless supply. When happiness becomes the mark of success, there isn't any competition. Pretty much everyone agrees that happiness is not limited, but can be had by everyone without depleting its supply. We can access this feeling of happiness by opening our hearts to a state of loving kindness. According to the Urban Dictionary, metta is a sincere wish for the welfare and genuine happiness of all beings, without exception. Metta can also be defined as the basis for shared happiness and joy. It has been said, when our metta meets another's happiness, then it transmutes into an empathetic joyfulness. Metta is boundless. We can feel metta for any sentient being, regardless of gender, race, or nationality. Metta is the most fulfilling emotional state that we can know. So what do we mean by metta happiness? Let me say what it is not. It is not the kind of so-called happiness that comes from addiction, including addiction to power, money, and material possessions, because that is transient. We may experience a sense of happiness when we get more money or possessions than someone else, but soon we want more. True happiness lasts. It is unselfish. It does not rely on competition. It does not wish ill on anyone else. Instead, we want everyone else to be happy as well. All of us here were raised in mostly third chakra times with those values, and at the same time, we also value happiness and loving kindness. All of us incarnate today are in transition. A few nights ago, I lost many hours of sleep because I was worrying about the stock market and my own investments. But in the morning, I felt happiness when I heard the birds singing. So I too, I'm in transition. I recently saw an article online that showed the results of research on happiness. The scientists discovered 4 universal experiences that make virtually everyone happy. Now, take a moment to feel these as I read them. In no particular order, they were: how you feel when someone tells you they love you, when you behold the beauty of nature, when a little child snuggles up to you, and when you do an act of pure kindness for another person. The resulting happiness you feel after something like this makes you successful in 4th chakra terms. But in these very troubling times, it can be hard to reach a state of happiness. We can't just pretend away feelings of grief, fear, and even despair, nor should we. We must feel and honor these emotions, but try not to live there. So when I start feeling these things, and I generally, when I start feeling the fear and the grief that these times bring about, I usually end up in despair. And I speak to those feelings. I feel those feelings. I can't just pretend they don't exist or make them go away. But as I go through this experience of honoring these feelings, eventually they begin to subside. And I can make the shift. And it helps me to remember our opening statement at the beginning of each service. There is only one presence and one power in the universe and in my life, God the good. Now, the Bible defines God in only one way, and that's in John chapter 4, verse 8, if you want to look it up. God is love. So when I remember this opening statement, I can synthesize it in these words. There is only one presence, and that is love. And when I remind myself of this, after I have allowed my feelings to run their course, I can see past the shadows to the reality of our nature. I can focus on my attention on the important things happening around me. Someone recently sent me this quote from Fred Rogers, as Mr. McFeely in the neighborhood said, "When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, 'Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping.'" And I see a lot of metta activity going on right now around me here in Lawrence, Kansas. People are looking out for one another. They're being friendlier, even as they're staying 6 feet away from each other. Neighbors are talking to each other as we walk our dogs. And all over the country, retired healthcare professionals are coming out of retirement to volunteer. People are making face masks on their own sewing machines for the hospitals. In Chicago, people opened their windows one day and they all sang together. Grassroots volunteer organizations where people can sign up to run errands and provide childcare is springing up all over. And there are now way more people volunteering to help than people needing help. Our Unity board members in the last 2 weeks called all the members of our congregation just to see how they were doing and find out if anyone needed help. And guess what? In our congregation, nearly 3 times as many people asked if they could help than people who asked for help. As Diane said last week, we are all becoming heroes. So in a very weird way, this COVID-19 may be catapulting us into the fourth chakra. And laughter, let's not forget that. All over the internet and Facebook, people are sharing coronavirus jokes. My favorites are about toilet paper. And here's one that I like. The cheerleader asked the cheering section, "What are we all gonna get?" "Coronavirus." "What are the symptoms?" "Cough, fever, shortness of breath." "What shall we do about it?" "Buy all the toilet paper." Oh, and this one. Some people are not shaking hands because of the virus. I'm not shaking hands because nobody has toilet paper. Well, we can't forget what's really going on. Laughter can help us get through this time. Now, of course, last week, Diane reminded us to honor our feelings of fear and grief, and that is extremely important. We're in tragic times as the rate of illness and death continue to rise. We can't deny that. And at the same time, we can experience happiness as well, because our emotions rise and fall. Someone recently told me that she felt guilty for being happy. No, our basic default as human beings is love and kindness. If left to our own devices, that's where we always go. And that equals happiness. I recently saw the play, Yours, Anne, at our local community theater. It's taken from the diary of Anne Frank and it's performed with song, kind of like a cantata or a miniature opera. Toward the end, when these 7 people have been living together for 2.5 years in a small attic room, and food is very scarce, Anne's parents sing a duet. The mother sings, "Our children are starving," while the father sings, "Our children are happy." And both were true. Even in this terrible, terrible time at the end of World War II, these Jews stuck in this attic, at least from time to time, the children were happy. Children know. So here's my wish for all of you. Stay strong, stay healthy, stay in touch, and be happy. Thank you.